Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This is S4A Livestream number 12, and it's April 5th, 2022. Had a productive weekend on the channel since the last live stream. This whole week, really. We were able to do 2 more chapters of Michael Parenti's Black Shirts and Reds. Those were chapters 5 and 6. Still have chapters 7, 8, and 9 to go. Now, I thought that those were going to get done over this past weekend. However, this weekend I did a whole bunch of Hanging with the Sock Dem clips. But I don't think that people are going to be too terribly disappointed because there were a lot of requests for Hanging with the Sock Dem clips. And, I kind of enjoyed it, actually. If I do too many of those, it kind of builds up on me. But I think doing them maybe once a month, I think I've found a way to do them without driving myself crazy because, if you just do them over and over again repeatedly, listening to the content and just the really bad social democratic takes, it does build up on you. I think maybe once a month, or maybe every other month, because people have asked for Hanging with the Bread Tube Gang clips as well. The Sock Dem clips revolve around Secular Talk, Kyle Kalinski's channel, and then I click on his channels tab to see who he's linking to. And then I, pick through their videos from the last 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, see if there's anything I want to comment on, might make a good reply video. I think Breadtube Gang, I don't know if Vaush links to people, but I'd probably use him because he's kind of like Mr. Breadtube, right? So we'll see. Maybe in 2 weeks we'll do that. Maybe in a month we'll do it. It all depends. But yeah, more Black Shirts and Reds coming. I do still have that Mao audiobook that kind of like went by the wayside in favor of Sock Dem Gang clips, which, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. When you see me upload an hour-long video on the channel, assume that like 3 or 4 hours went into that, maybe more, actually. So there were 5 Hanging with the Sock Dem Gang clips, response to Kyle Kalinski, reply to David Pakman, reply to Tom Hartman, David Dole, The Rational National, and Tim Black on a variety of subjects. I also, today, one of the channels that Kyle Kalinski links to is Joe Rogan. I would not include Joe Rogan in the Sock Dem Gang. He's more of like a libertarian, much more far-right type of guests, quote, intellectual dark web people, stuff like that, right-wing stuff, libertarian, stuff like that. And he had on a guest, Michael Schellenberger, who is just, in my opinion, an absolute piece of shit. And you can see a whole video that I did about that. Actually, I would recommend, if you're going to pick one thing to listen to from this past week, I would recommend the Schellenberger video. It starts with hashtag housing crisis, Joe Rogan guest, Michael Schellenberger's San Francisco book is One Big Right-Wing Lie. It's all about homelessness, basically, and what Schellenberger and Rogan refer to as the, quote, homeless problem, what the rest of us who have a conscience would refer to as the housing crisis. But Schellenberger lives in Berkeley Hills, California, where the median house price is $1.5 million. And he wants to weigh in on the, quote, homeless problem, which basically you could define as, hey, I see homeless people over there. That to him is the homeless problem. So he wants to kind of get them out of sight. And so we did a whole video about that. I think it's a good starter video on the subject of homelessness and the housing crisis. I also have a couple of videos coming up that I pulled during the research or, pulling supporting articles on the Schellenberger thing, which are also about the housing crisis. They weren't specifically about Schellenberger, whereas the other 2 articles I did were. So I'll be breaking those off into another video. Plus, I just uploaded plenty of content this weekend, and I want to spread it out a little bit more. The last thing that we got to in the 8 videos that I've done since the last live stream, which, pat on the back to myself there, that's a productive week in S4A terms, is a COVID update. So I think that this is pretty important, honestly. We're now at the point in the United States where the BA.2 strain of Omicron has passed 50% of the overall COVID cases. Now, when I did that video 4 days ago, 5 days ago, whatever it is, BA.2 had not yet crossed 50% in all the different 10 regions of the United States. It has now. Let me see if I can put that on the screen, actually. I think I can actually. So we have, yeah, that should be on the screen now. So that's the CDC, and up top, upper left, you see the pink is BA.2. This is a strain of Omicron that people have not mostly had yet. What people had back in December, January, February was BA.1 and a couple of variants of BA.1. So BA.2 is incoming. It has been wreaking havoc in Europe and Asia. And now you can see on the region by region chart underneath, it is now the dominant strain everywhere in the country. So I thought that this would be hitting a little bit faster than it is. I mean, enjoy the downtime between surges, definitely. I'm not trying to like root for it, but don't get complacent. I mean, I think almost at this point, it's like almost better to have like more frequent surges in the sense that people get less complacent. The fact that we're having such a lull right now after BA.1 Omicron is kind of feeding the like COVID is over narrative. I am pretty sure that we're about to find out that it's not. And well, I already know it's not, but I think everyone is about to find out, quote, the hard way, that it isn't. So up on the screen now should be, this is from Biobot, biobot.io. This is basically a wastewater monitoring site. I tried to say both words at the same time. So at different water monitoring stations around the United States, they do test for different bacteria and viruses and chemicals and all different stuff showing up in the sewage. And this is, you can set it to the last 6 months or the entire pandemic or just the last 6 weeks. This is the last 6 weeks. You can clearly see that the curve is going up. Now it is at very low levels. That's at least the darker curve at the top is the amount of COVID genetic material detected in the wastewater. The curve at the bottom, or the line at the bottom, is the number of cases. So that's a whole other thing. It's cases are more of a lagging indicator. It takes longer for those data to show up. Also, there's a lot of things where they don't count all the cases now, and then there's also rapid tests are much, there's many more people are using rapid tests, and those cases don't get counted. They're off books cases, unless people follow up the rapid test with going out and getting a PCR test, which is still kind of the gold standard. There's even like a LAMP test, but even that is less reliable than the PCR test, and the LAMP test is not a home test. Anyway, when I did that update last week, the curve was not quite this far along. You can clearly see, on the left side of the chart, the end of February, that was the tail end of the BA.1 variant coming down. And then it leveled off, plateaued at the bottom in March, and now what you see on the right side is BA.2. BA.1 has been phased out, BA.2 is coming in. How high is this curve going to go? It's just starting. I mean, it's really very low levels so far. But the direction of the curve matters because, again, BA.2 has recently become dominant. So people even can get reinfected to a certain extent with BA.1, but definitely even more so. Let's say you had BA.1, your odds of getting BA.2 are somewhat lower, but we're seeing a lot of reinfection. So anyway, just breaking this down by region a little bit more. The yellow-orange line at the top, that's the Northeast. Last week when I did the video, most of these were still flat. Now you can see all the regions, the South, the Midwest, and the West, are all starting to curve upwards. So we're still in the very early stages of it. But, how long do we have? I mean, I was saying 2 or 3 weeks before. I think I was definitely overestimating the speed at which this was happening. I was looking at some other epidemiologists. They were saying more like 4 to 6 weeks. So, I don't know. But, and again, you can see there's wobbles in the curve. They will go up, then they'll go down, dip a little bit, then go back up. I don't know precisely what's behind that, if it's something in the data collection or what it is. But, the further that we zoom out from this, as the new data come in, we can see that there is that upward curve. And given what has happened, what is happening now in China, for example, and what has happened in Europe has been happening, the U.S. has been lagging behind them. This is pretty typical. So the U.S. will be getting probably a surge of this. The only question is exactly when and exactly how high it goes. So anyway, that's just a little bit of get my normal backer. There we go. Okay, backing image back up. So that's what's going on there. And, that's brief. I'm not going to do a separate video on that. This live stream I'll have to do. So anyway, that's been the last week or so. Also, we had April Fool's Day, and I did put up a post advertising that I would be having Alexander Dugin and Caleb Maupin and Infracell, and then Peter Coffin would come on and kick himself in the groin again, as he became famous for doing. Originally, back in the day, he was sort of like a wannabe, like Weird Al type of character. Anyway, pathetic. And again, there's nothing wrong with being like a novelty musician, comedian person, but doing it well also helps, I guess. But yeah, that was an April Fool's joke. Hopefully, nobody took that for real. And if you did, come on. All right. So I guess that's sort of, the intro for the week. There will be some videos, again, like kind of a follow-up to the Schellenberger thing about the housing crisis coming up. Probably is the next video, and then we will get back into the audiobooks soon. Okay, so let's catch up with the chat. And yes, Weird Al does go hard. Really, no offense to Weird Al. Just it's one thing to be a wannabe Weird Al. It's another thing to actually be Weird Al. And there's only one Weird Al, so what can we say? All right. What else do we have? Have I seen Ukraine on fire? No, what is that? I do not know. All right. Black Shirts and Reds is so good. Yeah, actually, when that's done, I think I'm going to make that on the YouTube channel. You can have a pinned video. Currently, the pinned video for non-subscribers is State and Revolution, and I think that makes a lot of sense because it's kind of like a frequently asked questions file, specifically for, I think, what gets asked the most by Western socialists, Western leftists, if you will. It's like some of the things that Western leftists are most often confused about when it comes to Marxism. So I think State and Revolution, that's why I pinned that. But I think you can set a different video for people who have subscribed to the channel. Currently, it's another piece by Lenin. Nothing wrong with that. But I think I may change the pinned for subscribers to Black Shirts and Reds. It is kind of just really solid. And it is sort of like another sort of frequently asked questions. Part 2, Lenin's is at the top. It's the theoretical basis of Marxism-Leninism and its orientation to the state, the bourgeois state, Marx calls the parasite state, and how that needs to be done away with because it's a product of bourgeois rule. This is something that both anarchists and social democrats, other factions of the broader left, tend not to really understand. Anarchists think the state, period, is the problem. And, I mean, to a certain extent, yes, we want to get to a state, or a state meaning like a time or set of circumstances in society where there is no state, but also Marxists understand that the state is a product of class society. And until classes are completely abolished and all that, you need a state because as the proletariat comes to be the ruling class in socialism, immediately after deposing capitalists, then we need to set up a worker state to enforce our class rule, build socialism. Then at some point, after you have abolished classes, your state also becomes less about ruling people or governing class conflict, class struggle, and more just about the administration of things, running the economy, running industry, etc. Because at that point, you've actually, when you have built socialism, then you don't have classes anymore, so there's not class struggle per se to oversee. But that's a long process, and that's, anarchists want to do away with it all up front. It's not really possible. Meanwhile, social democrats misunderstand it the other way. They don't understand that there are different states, like the feudal state is different from the bourgeois state, etc. The bourgeoisie tore down the old state and built a new one, to represent their class rule and their class interests, and that the same thing needs to happen. So you tend to get more of this reformist, we can take the bourgeois state and just keep reforming it and reforming it. Now, at some point you have to, it's a product of bourgeois rule. So if the goal is to abolish bourgeois rule, then abolishing the artifacts and implements of bourgeois rule, that also was part of the deal. Anyway, where was I? So that's Lenin's sort of the state and revolution off the bat. It's a good theoretical intro. Then after you're like, okay, you've sold me, what about all these historical situations? I think that Black Shirts and Reds comes in there with sort of another sort of frequently asked questions file for bringing people up to speed on, like, some of the contentious things. But didn't Stalin kill 89 bajillion people, etc.? All those kinds of questions. So yeah, it probably will be the pin post for people who have joined the channel. All right, next question or comment. Is it just me, or is Vaush even more insufferable than Sockdems? I mean, Vaush is closer to a neocon than Kyle Kalinske, lol, based on their last debate. Yeah, I mean, Vaush calls himself a libertarian socialist, which is just a hoot. Because, I mean, if you've ever met, like, a crusty radical anarchist, okay, I may disagree with them on, like, those theoretical points we were just talking about now. And I think there's real consequences of that. Like, that's not just, as Vaush would say, aesthetic differences. That's a real distinction. Like, I think anarchists fundamentally, they're seeking social liberation through liberation of the individual, whereas Marxists seek social liberation through the liberation of the working class. And these are pretty fundamental issues. That said, I mean, if you want to, talk radicalism and who could you actually have more of a conversation with, I think your average actual anarchist, not like the Vaush type. Not an anarcho-Bidenist, but like an actual anarchist out there. You probably have a lot more in common. That said, even a lot of those anarchists tend to have not the greatest foreign policy ideas. Just abolish all borders doesn't quite cut it in a world that is still dominated by imperialism and class struggle. We need realistic paths to actually try to achieve those goals. But yeah, this whole like anarchist U.S. State Department overlap and convergence on talking points is awful. So that's I don't think Vaush is actually a quote libertarian socialist, an anarchist, whatever. I mean, I think he calls himself a market socialist, but then China to him, which arguably is some kind of market socialism, arguably at least, that's fascism, etc., etc. So I don't think he has like any sincere points. He also doesn't read any theory. So you can't really be a socialist and read zero theory. I think he's read half of one book one time. I'm sorry, but that doesn't count. That's not serious. Put down the video games and actually read something. I think he studied maybe sociology in school. The quality of that particular education, maybe as a starting point, but they're not going to probably have you reading a ton of, Lenin and Stalin, etc. there. You may read some Marx, but anyway, so, I mean, Vaush will say fucking anything. I think it's much more about getting the clicks, getting the money. I mean, he's rolling in money now, so I think that's much more what it's about. Not to mention, I mean, all of the other gross, skeezy stuff he does with, like, the parasocial stuff and, the way that he gets in with the audience, and there's kind of, like, inappropriate relationships with the female viewers and fans and stuff. So I think Vaush is in it for all the wrong reasons. And this is, of course, then there's the whole topic of, like, are, actual, like, U.S. intelligence people paying him, which would be the next step, aside from just being a giant sleazebag. Is he actually being paid to have these bad views? I think the views are so bad at this point, I definitely wouldn't rule it out. I don't think we have affirmative proof at this point. So it's up in the air. It's a question. But people are always like, oh, he's not being paid. And I'm like, no. You show me evidence he's not being paid, which of course you can't, because you can't prove the negative. Show me evidence he's not being paid, If you could somehow do that, show me every bank account he has access to or whatever. These are, of course, wild hypotheticals, but we don't know that. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Is like, don't cover for the guy when he's doing what he's doing. Don't be like, oh no, he's not being paid. You don't know he's not being paid. He might be. Okay, so I'm just trying to be logical here. Facts and logic. Facts and logic. They don't care about your feelings. All right, but anyway, Vaush is incredibly insufferable. I guess it depends on which SocDems you mean. I do think on the whole, honestly, like a lot of the SocDems are more sincere in their politics than Vaush is, for sure. Again, just the amount of, I think he will say kind of anything. I don't know what his real positions are about anything besides give me money, so I don't know. But yeah. I mean, it's kind of a toss-up, but, like, I guess another way to, like, look at that is what's the difference? You look at a Kyle Kalinske or a Humanist Report or a David Dole or somebody like that. They've been doing their thing for a while. Is there money in it? Yes. I mean, they've also been incredibly consistent over time in a certain way. We might have all kinds of criticisms of their politics, but I think that their commitment to actually a better world, however like limited their vision of that may be, is, I'd say on the whole, like, I can trust in that more than I could trust in a Vaush. It kind of amazes me that anyone takes him seriously at all. Actually, what I would like to see is more, people like who have large channels, ganging up on him to drive him off. I think he's way past the sell-by date. But then again, I'd like to see that with more channels in general. I'd like to see larger Marxist channels doing statements on, Infracell and Maupin and driving them out. I mean, really, what are people waiting for exactly? I think there needs to be more of a concerted effort on those kinds of things. If we want this to turn into anything in the real world, we do have to handle those things. So anyway, somebody says, I think he had Jordan Peterson on once, actually. Do you mean Vaush? I don't know who you mean, who had Jordan Peterson on. Jordan Peterson's awful. Absolutely awful. I was in a bookstore one time, and I was like, reading something, and somebody was like, telling their friend, like, look at this book. And I looked, and it was Jordan Peterson. I was just, it's like, I walked over and I was just like, this is just my opinion, but that guy is awful. Please read literally anything else. And I was like, just my opinion, and walked away. But I felt like I was just like, literally anything I can do to stop impressionable youth. And he was exactly the target age. He was like a 19-year-old white guy. And I was just like, please, for the love of God, do not read that. All right, continuing. Any plans to do community projects with the channel? I saw one playlist you did previously where I solicited others to read a chapter of a longer work. Yeah, so actually we never even finished that. I had people signing up and then not doing it. I mean, you expect a certain amount of that. I actually did a round 2 on it, and there were people volunteering for chapters. And then even on round 2, where we were down to like 6 or 7 chapters needed to be done, I don't think that the entire thing got finished. It was kind of a pain in the ass, honestly. It was kind of like pulling teeth. So maybe again, but I have a limited time budget for this. A lot of the videos that I do require a huge amount of time to put them together. So the fact that I get anything out is kind of amazing in a way. Particularly like this past week, I got like whatever it was, 8 videos online. Honestly, just I'm not trying to like call the audience ungrateful, but like I do need you to like appreciate what is actually going on the channel at all in relation to just how much time it takes to do. So in other words, for me in running the channel, I have to make a lot of decisions constantly about where can I be most effective. So I have to make a lot of choices about this over this and then that over that, and so that's constantly like the thing of trying to juggle priorities. And if something doesn't wind up on the channel, it's because other things just keep trumping it in terms of the priority list. And Yeah, that was one that it was not like it was good, and I was happy to get other people, maybe some of whom will go on to do channels of their own, and I would like to see that, and that was part of where that was coming from. It was kind of like enough of a hassle that like it's still incomplete, and I just kind of like moved on to other things. Maybe if it had been more of a smashing success, like I would have done that more. Of course, nobody's nothing is stopping people from just kind of doing that on their own, but yeah, as far as that, I'm constantly making decisions about do I do this or do I do this, and constantly also at the same time, like 100 people in my ear leaving comments, do this, do this, do this, and it's like just believe me, I got a hopper full of 1,000 different video ideas, and what actually gets made in a week is the result of a lot of priority juggling. So that one, it just maybe it will come up again when there is a lull in a lot of other stuff. But yeah, finishing the comment, seems like that may have been tough to coordinate in ensuring that all chapters get submitted, but perhaps soliciting readings of shorter works. See, but the thing about shorter works is I can just do them myself. So, you know what I mean? The idea there was, hey, let's do a longer work where I just do a couple of chapters and then people collaboratively fill out the rest. Maybe when the channel gets to like 10,000, we're at 7.1 currently, 1,000. When we get to like 10,000, maybe I'll put it out again. Maybe it'll like go a little more quickly or something. But yeah, I mean, I think I tried that when the channel was at like 4,000. So smaller audience, smaller volunteer base. But it's a good idea, and thank you. I did enjoy it, and it was nice seeing those things come up that did get produced by people, and I thought that they were all good. It turned into a bit of a hassle at the end, yeah. Let's see. I also hate how Zizek is being forced in my face by the algorithm constantly. Yeah, we've talked about Zizek a little bit. I don't really get the appeal. I mean, he seems kind of anti-Marxist to me, honestly, so I'm not a fan. What else do we have? Always wondered why there was so much socialism on Twitch, but then I realized it was mostly appeals to kids. Yeah, I'm not really on Twitch. I don't really do the video game thing so much, and if I do, I'm just going to play it myself probably rather than watch somebody else play it. But I guess that's what people do now. But yeah, I mean, why is there so much socialism on Twitch? I don't know. I don't know how much of it is actually good, quality as well. All right. So let's see. Maupin unironically refers to Dugin as a, quote, respected anti-imperialist. Yeah, so here's the thing. Actually, somebody sent me a link to like a Dugin summary that I was just watching right before doing this stream. And I mean, I'm familiar with the broad strokes. I have gone through various like introductions to Dugin in the past. But I think that one of the things that stood out was this person was emphasizing how Dugin is like very anti-U.S. and very anti-liberalism, and is all about Russia having its own philosophy and the Eurasianism and all that stuff. And I think that an important thing for people to remember about that is like communists are anti-liberal as well because liberals are pro-capitalism. But also remember that fascists are also anti-liberalism. Fascism originally posited itself as like a third way, third position. Neither socialism nor capitalism. Of course, it is capitalism in the end. It's just a lie. But yeah, remember, fascists have lots of anti-liberal rhetoric as well. That doesn't make you anti-imperialist. Literally, like one of the more famous works of post-war fascism is Imperium. Okay, so, I don't know. It's just think it through, people. Then again, no one ever accused fascists of overthinking things, let's put it that way. Heavily anti-intellectual. I mean, he's a Russian nationalist and has a lot of fascist ideas. Great. I mean, it's like nothing new. Yeah, Maupin's a joke. What else can you say, Somebody said, I don't think we should pay any attention to who or what Maupin respects. Yeah, like I said, I think that larger Marxist YouTubers should, and maybe not as an ongoing thing because then that platform's mopping, but maybe just 1 month, everybody makes an Pat Sock video, and then that has been said loud and clear, and it's driven further out into the fascist sphere where it belongs, but correctly labeled. In other words, I think that that's a lot of the thing. Maupin will constantly whine about people call me fascist, and well, I don't know. Maybe if 90% of your content wasn't like fascist adjacent, people wouldn't be fucking saying that. So just a thought. All right. Oh God. Please don't start with pro Dugan comments. You will get tossed out of here. Seriously. Don't. Just don't. All right. Somebody says, I've liked your reading of Parenti. Do I plan on reading more of his works? You would like to hear Inventing Reality. Yes, although there are many, many, many other authors. People had been requesting Black Shirts and Reds for about a year before I got to it, so just understand. Reading a book. I uploaded a Gramsci, Against Pessimism, and I think one other thing. Somebody's like, can you upload his prison diaries? And I was just like, what do you think? I'm just sitting on them? Like, maybe I'll upload these one day. So when you say upload, you mean actually sit down, read, and not just read, but get a good take on every line, edit out all the mouth noises and all that kind of stuff. Spend hours and hours and hours doing that, then upload it. I feel like people think I just have like this hard drive full of like audiobooks that somehow I record in my sleep, and it's just a question of whether I feel like uploading them or not. Anyway, that's not how it works. We need to lose the commodity fetishism here. Like, I'm a real person making these things. All right. Oh God, Russia. No, sorry, dude. Sorry, pro-Russia guy. You're gone. There we go. Okay, much better. Let's see. And yes, this is not a Debate Bro stream, and let's not argue with the trolls, as always. Somebody says I should do more Parenti if I get the chance. Some of his other books are hard to come by. Yeah, I mean, again, it's popular. So, I know it goes over well every time that we do it. It's just, there is a lot of stuff. I haven't even done Capital yet. You know what I mean? I'm still trying to get through some of the very long works, like Anti-Düring, in the basic Marxism-Leninism study guide, which to me comes before that. So, anyway. it is what it is. Like, if I could snap my fingers and have it all recorded. If I sound frustrated, I am. Just the amount of, I think, kind of insensitive requests that people make. It's like, I don't know, in the meantime, while you're waiting for it, maybe you could go listen to some of the other 400 plus videos that I actually have done rather than fixating on the ones that I haven't. It just kind of irritates me after a while. So, hello, have I seen Infracell complaining when his Uber Eats came to his house? No, I do not watch him. No, I do not watch him. Nor am I particularly interested in watching him. But thank you for the suggestion. What leftist ideology has the best designed flag? I don't know. I'm not. What is it? A vexillologist that studies flags? I'm not really into that. I don't know. I'm sure somebody would have a very strong opinion on who has the best flag. That person would not be me. Nothing against those who are into flags, though. Let's see. So somebody says nothing beats the hammer and sickle. Yeah, arguably, though, at this point, at least in good chunks of the world, the hammer and sickle is somewhat outdated. There are still countries that have a peasantry. There are now many that don't. So, I mean, that is what it is. The urban proletariat, or more urban proletariat anyway, being the hammer, and then the peasantry being represented by the sickle. People have, thrown out, like, are there sort of updated representations of tools? I mean, it's kind of lame. Like, what are you going to put, like, a computer keyboard or, like, a phone on there? It just, like, doesn't make for a good flag, really. All right, now I guess I do have strong opinions. No, these are mildly felt opinions. I do not hold them strongly. Although, if somebody came out with a red flag with a like yellow computer keyboard, I probably would develop strong feelings quickly, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. There is nothing wrong with it. It's historical. I mean, there's also the star, the five-pointed star. That's kind of a classic as well. Nothing wrong with that. All right, what else do we have? Somebody else. If any anarchist types think that the state should be abolished, many capitalists agree with you. So, well, so the capitalists. So you got right libertarians that what they're when they talk about getting rid of the state, or like talking about getting the government small enough that they can drown it in the bathtub. That's not actually what they want. They want to privatize state functions. They want to do a few things. So the libertarian slogan is defund, deregulate, privatize. They want to defund social programs, deregulate private businesses, and then privatize everything that can be privatized. That includes many government functions. And in fact, since the late 70s and into, of course, the Reagan years in the 80s, many things have been privatized. Many former government things were privatized because, get out the government interference, let the market decide. All right. You know what I'm saying? That kind of like Ron Paul-esque thinking. Let the market decide and get the government, out of the marketplace. Don't have them as a competitor. Don't have them interfering. So in this way, they tore down a lot of the reforms of the golden age of social democracy from the 30s to the 70s. And now we're 40 years into neoliberalism, and so many things have been privatized, and they keep pushing and pushing and pushing. But it's not really that they don't want a state per se. They still want capitalism there, and capitalism is based on private property for a minority being like the determining factor in the social relations and daily lives of the majority. Well, how do you get a situation like that without a state, without the threat of force if the working class challenges their private property rights? You absolutely need a state. They just want to get it as small as they possibly can, particularly with respect to the parts of the government that came out of workers' struggles, that give workers some kind of rights in this system, that tie back capitalism to some extent. That's really what they want to get rid of. But no, they absolutely would not be able to survive without a state. Large chunks of it may be privatized, but they would still be doing those same things. All right. Let's see. What else do we have? A lot of people talking about Vaush, and I think I have exhausted that topic for today. Somebody says, I think it was Joe Rogan who had Peterson on. Yeah, I think Rogan had him on more than once. Actually, recently, too. Peterson appeared in a tuxedo, which led to the, I think I've said this before, but I found it amusing. Peterson had the whole, benzo rehab thing, and somebody screenshotted him on the Rogan show in a tux, and it was like, the caption was, our recovering addict friend recently has been appearing in public in a tuxedo, and we're not sure that it means he's doing better or worse. And I thought that was appropriate. All right. Talking about Peterson, 12 rules for life. One rule is stand straight up. Okay, why? Stand for what? Against what? People need something worth doing and to believe in, something worthwhile to act towards. Yeah, something in your class interests, certainly, as a starting point. But yeah, these are old conservative, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. I actually thought it would be really funny at one point. I never got around to it because I couldn't, I didn't generate a long enough list, basically. But taking old, really hackneyed, generic political slogan phrases like that, and then using communist graphics on it, I just thought it would be amusing. Symbols of very radical politics, but then combined with very middle of the road, generic political phrases. Anybody wants to get on that, or just send me a good quality list of a dozen such phrases. That would be appreciated. I just find it funny. But yeah, Peterson's advice is fucking crap. There was that meme going around. It's like a cartoon of Peterson with somebody who looks like a small version of Bobby Hill sitting on his knee, and the Bobby Hill is sort of positioned like a marionette dummy. I just said that wrong. Ventriloquist dummy or marionette. Pick one. Again, trying to say the same thing at the same time. Different thing. There we go. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the kid is saying he's got all these great new ideas like Christian conservatism. And I think that kind of sums it up. Like, people are getting all excited about Peterson. He's, it's, well, like I was just saying about Schellenberger, another member of the intellectual dark web. What's correct is not new, and what's new is not correct. I mean, yeah, to a point, cleaning your room may help you stay a bit more organized. It's not going to like change structural racism, It's not going to change the fact that like the housing prices went up 30% in 1 year last year. But I mean, yeah, on a personal level, it might help you from getting like 3% more swamped than you would have been otherwise. But like, this is entirely the wrong focus, but yet it's like 100% of Peterson's focus. And but then again, Peterson goes into things about, the chaos dragons and how masculinity is correct and orderly and femininity is frightening and chaotic. And it's fascist ravings is what it is. And it just needs to be summed up as fascist ravings. There's not much else really that needs to be said about it. Although, again, we're in a situation where people just don't even understand what fascism is anymore. So I guess that has to be said as well. But yeah, that's how I would sum it up. Okay, so there's a comment. Elections were held in Hungary on Sunday. Yeah, so actually I did see this headline, and I was so busy with my other videos. I actually did pull an article to maybe get into that this week. Orban claimed victory. Very, very far right politician. And I do want to get into that. I haven't really read the articles yet. So that may be coming up on the channel. Anyway, comment. Elections were held in Hungary on Sunday. The Republican-esque ruling party that's been in power for the last 12 years, endorsed by Tucker Carlson and Trump, won huge against the centrist, neoliberal United Opposition, endorsed by Hillary Clinton. So pause there. The comment does go on. But to pause there, this is a dynamic we've been seeing for a while now, where capitalism is dividing into this kind of Hillary Clinton-esque or Macron-esque or whatever the case is in Hungary. I don't know that politician's name, versus a very far-right figure. So as far as the working class goes, you get two shit choices. You get kind of right-wing or very right-wing, and those are the big choices. This is where capitalist electoral politics are going in the 21st century. This is where it's going. The proletariat absolutely needs to become an independent force, an independent player. Otherwise, these are going to be your options, okay? I can't do it for people. I can merely point it out. People have to get organized and build a party outside the Democrats in the case of the United States, etc. It has to get, excuse me, I got to take a sip of water. Okay. This has to happen now. Just, people have been saying we need to do this for 20 years. We haven't done it. Where's it gotten us? And not doing it for another 20 years. I shudder to think what will happen at that point. But anyway, this is a dynamic happening in a lot of countries. In the case of France, for example, Macron beat out Le Pen, but I don't know, there's always next time. You're not always going to be so, quote, lucky. And again, it's not even a good choice. You just avoided the absolute worst outcome. So this is what the capitalist class is interested in putting up, and it's going to keep happening until workers start calling the shots for ourselves. I cannot stress this enough. All right, continuing. Unprecedented victory for Orban in an election that was supposed to be a liberal takeover. Well, the same thing with Trump. Liberals are calling the majority of the country unlearned, brainwashed fools. Excuse me. Same with the Democrats. And while that is certainly true to an extent, again, same in the United States, even without the brainwashing, the liberals wouldn't be popular. Certain parties and politicians in the opposition were responsible for the near total breakdown of this country following the destruction of socialism. And commenting that that's the bottom line here. Again, when the proletariat ceased to be an independently organized militant force, that there's found your problem. I'm in my mechanic's clothes. I got the hood open. Hey, I found your problem. Your working class is not independently organized. That's why. That's why. All right. You just there's no other like distinct problem here. It's that class struggle has broken down. Okay. Neither one of the big parties. Well, let me rephrase. Both of the big parties are controlled by the same class. Therefore, there's not actual class struggle going on, merely just differences in style in the same class. Class struggle is the engine of history. So if there's not class struggle, there's no push towards socialism. There's no hope for workers without that organization. That's how it works. Continuing the comment, that anger was picked up by the equally capitalist, quote, illiberal right. Because of our experience with it, Western liberalism won't be popular here for a long time, but that's a piece of truth the liberals aren't ready to hear. Yeah, I mean, I assume, big money is dominating those politics in some way, and I can't speak, I'm not super up on the particular conditions of Hungary, so I'm not an expert with that, but I mean, I would venture to guess that it's been a similar story to just everything that's happened post 1990. It's just like people have decided, Marxism didn't work, whatever. Now you're starting to see some nostalgia for it. And it seems to me like we have to kind of just have a complete do-over of the movement, because even the vestiges of the leftover communist parties, they don't seem to be functional. Look at CPUSA, for example. You get some actually radical people in the membership, but is the party, leadership, it's still these kind of boomer holdovers from just a bygone era. I think we need to smash that and move forward, I've said this before with one of the Mao audiobooks. He talks about how in the revolution, when the movement was making right opportunist errors, the revolutionary momentum and trajectory stopped. Then when they corrected those errors, the revolution proceeded. Then for a while, the revolution was making some ultra-left adventurist errors, and the revolution slowed down and stopped. Then when they corrected those errors, the revolution proceeded. Well, the revolution has stopped. Okay, so there are errors that need to be corrected. And would you say today that, not just in the US, but overall, the errors are more of a left adventurist type of category, or are they more of a right opportunist, bourgeois hugging, abandoning class struggle category? Yeah, I think it's clear. If anyone wants to make the argument for the left adventurism, be my guest. But I think that there's a mountain of evidence that the overwhelming problem is in the right opportunism category, abandoning the key tenets of socialism and too many compromises with the bourgeoisie, backing off of the fundamentals of class struggle and so forth. So when we correct those errors, the revolution will proceed again. Class struggle will effectively proceed again until, while those errors are still in effect, then, you're just handing over everything to the capitalist class for that amount of time. That's where we are today, in my opinion. So, but yeah, I do hope to cover more of the situation in Hungary, or at least, if not in a video, maybe at least in a live stream. I do want to read up on that a little bit more. All right. Continuing, are the issues... All right, this is a change of topic. Actually, big change of topic. I just got to take a break from it. We've been going for about an hour. I'll be right back, so just hang tight for 2 or 3 minutes. All right, we're back. So, the question here, are the issues with modern food, added sugar in everything, for example, directly related to capitalism at all? I rarely see this talked about much, but our health is genuinely total shit. Cuba now has a longer life expectancy. Yeah, the U.S. life expectancy is declining currently. That's like for several years now. It's not just like the first year and, well, it might be a fluke. No. The U.S. is definitely declining in life expectancy. That's unprecedented. So alarming. Politicians should be running on that. Again, it's barely being discussed, kind of like the housing crisis. But is it directly related to capitalism? You have to kind of get into an entire history of food at this point. I kind of don't know exactly where to begin talking about this. Some of it has to do with preservatives because salt and sugar can, have a preservative effect. Part of it is that. So you could say, for example, like in more traditional, people have been eating since forever, okay? So there are definitely, there was one way of eating for like a very long time. And then in the modern era, like 20th century or so, there have been major changes as far as like food meats industry, and particularly processed food with preservatives. There's a lot of benefits to that as far as convenience and things like that. But there are also some drawbacks. And if you compare some of the processed food to a more traditional diet, in a more traditional diet, you get a lot more fiber, more whole grains, more whole beans, legumes, nuts, things like that also tend to not impact blood sugar quite as badly, for example. So there's all kinds of stuff, and so people cook less, which is, again, both a blessing and a curse. Like, it's nice when you have the time to cook, but when you're working like 10 hours a day, like it's in other words, it's not like a value judgment or like a personal condemnation if people don't have time to cook for themselves. So if you have to eat processed food, like, I understand there's conditions for that. That said, I mean, in the era when people ate a more traditional diet, there were fewer of the chronic illnesses, some of the chronic illnesses anyway, that you're seeing now on kind of a major level. So some of it has to do with the, shift in people using raw ingredients towards more and more packaged foods and processed things. I don't know that I can go into it like much more right now. Maybe that's something of a starting point. If people have like more specific follow-up questions, maybe we could get into some of those. But yeah, I mean, there have been major changes in the things that people eat and what's in them and how they're prepared and all that kind of stuff. I mean, for example, just the difference between brown rice and white rice. White rice, you've rubbed off all the outer fiber. It goes stale and bad more quickly. It's also more kind of tender, delicate, and like less rough to eat. So, but it's going to hit your blood sugar harder, and there's less fiber in it, which is also important for gut health and all kinds of things like that. So just, that for one thing. I mean, the kind of bread that people eat is kind of like cake today. So I guess there are questions there about, how can people eat kind of healthier stuff that's a bit closer to more traditional things that our body is actually adapted to eating, while still accounting for the fact that like a lot of people don't have any time to cook. It's tough. But I mean, you see when the Western diet gets introduced into places, you start seeing some of these like lifestyle diseases appearing that just weren't there previously when people were on the other diet. So, I mean, is it directly related to capitalism? I think some of the added sugar is for sure, because sugar can be addictive. And there's sugar in all kinds of stuff now that So, for example, if you want to break down how much sugar is in what you're eating, a packet of sugar is about 3 to 4 grams of sugar. So, 3.5 grams, something like that. So if you take like a can of soda or even juice, think of like orange juice that has 30 or 33 grams of sugar, which is pretty typical for like a can. Um, it would be like sitting down and eating 10 packets of sugar. That's not something most people would do, but you are consuming a huge amount of sugar in in packaged food and sodas and things like that. I'd definitely say don't drink soda ever. Really, drink water or something. But yeah, this is another thing. People drinking their calories. There's a lot of. I think it's 73 point. This came up in a video. It was the long COVID video. Not a video about long COVID, but a long video about COVID that I did recently. 73% of adults in the United States are either overweight or obese. So, like, where is that coming from? There's more than one factor, but like one of them is drinking calories, and you see people walking around with like a half gallon of soda. I just can't even. It's like you might as well be walking around with a bag of sugar with a spoon in it, like Homer Simpson. So, anyway, there's a lot going on there. I've thought about doing some maybe like food-related videos on the channel. I know Luna Oi does some she has done cooking videos on her channel. There's definitely ways you can eat better than just what the processed stuff is. It doesn't, as many kind of right-wingers who get into this like health field, they start making it out like, oh, I'm superior, and no, it's not really that. It's just like some things are kind of better for you to put in your body than other things. And again, we want to remove the value judgment because people have really been forced into eating crap in a lot of ways, and especially it can be intergenerational and stuff like that. And actually changing your eating habits can cause like huge friction within your family. So there's like all kinds of things there. And then in different ethnic groups, the traditions are going to be different. But it's a conversation worth having because there are kind of like an enormous amount of health problems going on. Some of it's stress, but some of it is diet. Like some of it's sleep also, and that gets into stress as well. But there's all kinds of things. Some of it's just like maybe tied to like exposure to artificial light. There's all kinds of things. So is this capitalism? We live in an era, in a society dominated by capitalism. It has caused many, many structural changes, and yes, that includes our food system. It's not even just we're eating the same foods, but they're grown differently with different ownership. We're eating different things now. We're eating different things. So, but this is a huge topic, and anyway, well, I'll move on for now. If anybody has like really specific questions, maybe we can talk about that. What else do we have here? Besides the Irish Republican Army and the KKE, is there any communist guerrilla movements in Europe that are fighting for freedom? I don't know. I'm not in Europe, and it's not to say I couldn't know the answer even being outside of Europe, but I'm just not as up on that, so I honestly don't know. If anybody in the chat has anything to offer on that point, we'll see. Will we get more Lenin soon? I have done more Lenin than any other author, including Marx and Engels, on the channel. I've done like 55 Lenin books, I think. So, the answer is yes, but like I am trying to balance it out. So the answer is yes, but I am trying to balance it out. Can I make a video about Amazon unionization? No, but there are other videos about it. And the reason is, I follow it on Twitter. I retweet stuff about it. It, I think, is such a saga that I have not been following down to the minutest detail that it would take me a huge amount of research time. On a positive note, though, I'm not the only channel out there, and a lot of people are covering it. So, like I said earlier, running the channel and producing the videos and everything, it's a constant prioritization. It's a question of, do I do this or this? And if there already are tons of channels doing pretty satisfactory coverage of it, then I don't necessarily feel the need to like stop what I'm doing and then cover it. If I feel like a lot of people are getting something super wrong, then I might be inclined to like bump it up the priority list a bit and be like, so I noticed this is getting a lot of attention, and from my perspective, I have a different opinion about it, and therefore let me just lodge that complaint. So no, I probably will not make a video about Amazon unionization. Not that I don't support it. Like I said, I follow stuff about it on Twitter and do retweet it, but I feel like there's already so much coverage that I'm just kind of focusing on other things. So, and like I said, it has such like a dense history that for me to get caught up enough to speak at all authoritatively about it is just challenging to like my schedule. So that's what it is. It's like if you don't see me covering something, it's not necessarily that like I don't support it, but it's just I may limit it to like retweets or something because I just, the amount of time it would take me to like actually get up to the point where I could really focus on it. And here's the other thing too, that you may not realize if you don't do a channel. Once you go down a particular avenue of like a line of research, it tends to be, snowball a little bit. Like once you've sunk in the 5 hours or whatever of doing background reading and doing the commentary and uploading and then responding to questions and, once you've done all of that, then you have like a fair amount of active knowledge and information and resources at your disposal. So for me, it's also a choice of like, what do I sort of want to invest in? And it's like I said, I see so many other people covering it. That's sort of the main factor that I have not like sunk in a lot of time. I feel like if I start with it, it's gonna be just keep going and going. So that's why I haven't, but we do cover other things, so that's the good news. All right, continuing. Solidarity to the Amazon workers that finally got a union. Yes, absolutely. Long and hard battle. Somebody says, I would like to read Capital soon, but I'm a bit intimidated. Are there any good introductory or companion texts that I can recommend to make reading Capital a bit more manageable? Well, Engels did. I forget the name of it. I don't think it's Response to Capital, but it's or Notes on Capital. I'm blanking on the name, but I will be doing it when we do Capital. However, yes, there is a good introductory text for Capital, but it doesn't exist yet. It will be the video that I do, because what I'm planning to do is break it down chapter by chapter and explain it. I've already done one chapter, the commodity. So if you want to read chapter 1, I have it on the channel, and I kind of break it down almost line by line as needed. That said, Marx did do a couple of other things, value, price, and profit. We will be doing that right before we do Capital, because it is part of the basic Marxism-Leninism study guide playlist. So I will be doing that. There's another one, Wage, Labor, and Capital, that is up on the channel now. I would recommend that. So, trying to think. I mean, those are probably the big ones, like Value, Price, and Profit, and Wage, Labor, and Capital. If you do those, then when you do read Capital, it will be easier. Plus, if you wait for my version of Capital, which will be coming up soon, again, after I get through anti-During and a couple of other things, Feuerbach, we got a couple of things to do, but we're near the end, okay? Capital is number 25 in the list. I just finished 19. So basically, I've got 4 things to do, then we do Capital, and one of them is Value, Price, and Profit. So that's good. And then number 26 is Lenin's Imperialism, Highest Stage of Capitalism. So really good stuff coming up soon. Again, it's like I said, priorities. I've been doing this channel for over a year, and I still have not finished doing audiobooks of the basic study guide, and I'm really trying to finish that, and things just keep popping up. So like, as I mentioned, I think in the last live stream, trying to do a bunch of texts on the national question, I've started that. I did Rosa Luxemburg and then one by Lenin. I've got like 4 more. Other stuff just keeps coming up. So, yeah. What else do we have here? What do I think about all leftists putting aside petty differences so that leftists could have a big enough political party so that we could stand some sort of chance in elections, but not to sound like an anarcho-hybridist, whatever that is. Okay. So my basic take on this question is I think that Occupy about 10 years ago was a critical step towards a coalescing of the left. And you had, for the first time, people really gathering in large groups talking about capitalism itself. It may sound strange to younger people now, but prior to 2008, people were just not talking about capitalism. Like, capitalism had won to the point that people dared not even speak its name. That was basically the point we were at. Post 2008, people are like, hey, what happened to my life? Does this have anything to do with that? What's that word? Capitalism? Was that what it was called? And so the conversation started. And about 3 years later, Occupy happened, and people were like, hey, I lost my house. Hey, I lost my job. Hey, I have $40,000 of student debt. Hey, I have $100,000 of medical debt. And people started those conversations, and it was key. And it was a big step forward. And then, that kind of died out. And then Bernie Sanders came back talking about a lot of the same stuff. And unfortunately, he put all that energy into the Democratic Party. He was rallying people into stadiums by the tens of thousands. And then he fed all that energy into a dead party that's controlled by big corporations, Wall Street. And we haven't barely heard a peep out of Bernie Sanders ever since. The last thing I heard him trying to do was get an N95 mask mandate. He had that out there for about a week, and then it vanished with a puff of smoke. So clearly that strategy didn't work real well, as anybody, including Bernie Sanders from 30 years ago, could have told you. What needed to happen at that time, I think, was Bernie either needed to take the movement into the Green Party or start another party and welcome everyone on the broader left to join it. And that was the best opportunity in 50 years, better than Ralph Nader in 2000, better than any other time in the last 50 years, to do it. Break the ground. Start building the foundation of the 21st century left party. And then it's up to the broad left. Marxists would be in there, along with the, people further right and whatever else. But we could actually get some kind of traction and skew the conversation towards the left, etc. These are things that you need to do in order to pull people from the very demoralized working masses into the struggle. You're here and I'm here, but millions of people are not here. And I don't just mean this channel. I mean having these kinds of conversations. It needs to spread and spread and spread. And so I do think that, stage 3 of this needs to be something like the Bernie movement. And I think it's going to be more than just one party. I think it does need to be a coalition of parties and organizations and etc. But we need to get to the point where we're filling stadiums, where whatever this left party is, or this left coalition, this left movement is, it fills stadiums. When it has conventions, 20,000 people show up and are excited, and there's, that gives us more of a platform for advertising, further left Marxist ideas, etc., being the left wing of that coalition. So I think that has to happen, absolutely. Will it happen? I mean, there was talk recently of even like DSA was kind of splitting over BDS, or there people were quitting over a stance that DSA took over BDS. I think that this is the wrong approach. Splintering just does not work. Okay? And fight. If you can't fight the right wing of DSA, can you fight anybody? Can you fight the big capitalists? I submit that no, you cannot. So my solution is fight. People are like, oh, but the Green Party isn't perfectly in line with every one of my political positions. Yeah, no party ever is going to be. You get in there and you do what you can. If it's that bad, then network with the people you can and join something else with them. But we have to build something. And, people want to sit back and criticize but not join. And this is a fairly American problem, not joining things, but just sort of sniping from the sidelines. People don't want to join things. People don't want to get involved, etc. And guess what? Nothing will ever change. Nothing will ever change if you don't get involved in the struggle. So yeah, I do think that we need something like that. I think we saw advances in left discourse after Occupy and during Occupy. I think we saw advances in left discourse and real world events during and after Bernie. And I think we need to continue it, but outside the Democratic Party, which was the critical error or misdirection that Bernie did. I've said this like a billion times. Still waiting for it to catch on. I really don't know what else it is. People think that some, tiny fringe group is going to do things on their own. You're in a country of 330 million people. It's not how it's going to work. Mass struggle. Mass struggle. It needs to actually involve the masses. So, it needs to be a movement that speaks to issues people are actually having. I think it's happening to some extent, but yeah, it's got to more faster now, because like we said before, what bourgeois politics is turning into more and more is this kind of like center right to right, like Hillary Clinton option or Joe Biden option versus the far right white nationalist option, Trump, Le Pen, Orban, people like that. That is death for the working class. So yeah, if we don't organize, I see only bad things happening, and so I think that it's the only way forward. So anyway, continuing. Do I have any advice for organizing in a reactionary union? Commenter works in an industrial print shop, and our contract has been up for almost half a year. They only want to give a 15-cent raise, which would be a pay cut. I did manage to rally enough of the lowest workers in seniority to get a management rights clause out of the contract. We don't have AC in the summer. That's awful. We get a daily rather than a weekly schedule. That's also awful. Management screams at us when our hands are in pinch points and we don't get breaks. First of all, my sympathies, because that's terrible. Our committee keeps pushing for these crappy contracts without addressing what actually affects us. We have to sign off even to get a weekend. How can I get people to see how we're treated when I've been spelling it out for them? It's incredibly frustrating. So yeah, my main first question would be, why does your committee keep pushing for that? Like, what are the reasons that they give for it? Why are they not addressing these fundamental things, and why are they not fighting for it? If you can answer some of those questions, I think that you can get closer to solving the problems behind them and giving rise to that behavior out of your fellow union members. Are you in the U.S. would be another question, and I'll leave it there for now, and I'll look maybe for a follow-up comment. So continuing. Too much class collaboration and opportunism in workers' parties today, and the lacking in leadership and of revolutionary theory to have a clear analysis of world events. Yeah, definitely. This goes back to the, is the problem today too much left adventurism, or is it too much like right-wing opportunism? Yeah, it's definitely more in the class collaboration, opportunism side of things today. But again, we're in this sort of post-communist, anti-Marxist like sphere, and I do think that people in their teens, 20s, 30s, 40s can push against that and break out of it. But literally, I think a lot of the people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, the other half of like people alive today, it's pretty much split down the middle. There's so much of that old school of thinking, and the whole the USSR collapsed. It didn't collapse. It was fucking destroyed. So yeah, I think that there's hope for it, but we got to start the push now. And then in 5 to 10 years, when more and more people have retired from these parties and or just, croaked from old age, when there's a new generation in these parties and the old generation is gone, I think that there's a chance. But you can't take it for granted, though. You got to actively push as hard as you possibly can for the ideas, and pointing out through struggle why the ideas are correct, not just arguing the ideas like in the abstract. So there's another comment about the food question from before. Food industry is based around addiction, sugar in everything. Sugar in everything, even and especially on low-fat foods designed to make people continuously buy. Yeah, and the problem with that, like, okay, yes, fat is very calorie dense. Like every gram of fat is more than double the calories of a gram of carbs or protein. But there's also the question of like how filling is it, and if you're just eating like low-fat stuff that kind of goes right through you, you're going to get hungry sooner and stuff like that. So I think people, need to just like think more about food too and kind of learn more about it. And I think if I do start doing videos, it'd probably be like along those lines. So also they continue, Big Pharma, health magazine, and fitness industries are also major profiteers in this space as well. Yeah, having bad body image, I mean, hugely important. So this is like kind of a general thing in many industries. Like in the music industry, you don't get rich pursuing the dream, you get rich selling the dream. So what can you make a lot of money at? You can make a lot of money at selling starter instruments, for example, because you're selling the dream to people who are going to try it out for a year, and then the vast majority of them are going to quit. So that's sort of the big thing. So you sell the dream. You sell the starter membership at the gym, the fitness club, whatever. You sell the subscription to the health magazine that in and of itself does not get any results for your fitness, overall health, whatever. So yeah, anyway. Continuing. Cultivated plants are bred to have more sugar. Natural plants, I would say wild plants, but yeah, don't have as much sugar as cultivated ones. You're absolutely correct there. So yeah, if you look at, and it's not always bad either, because, for example, if you look at wild carrots versus cultivated carrots, in the U.S. we have a kind of wild carrot here. It's Queen Anne's lace. It is a roadside weed, grows practically everywhere. The roots of Queen Anne's lace, be very careful because it also has a poisonous look-alike, hemlock. But, I mean, there's ways to tell it apart. Anyway, the roots of that are edible, but they're kind of like beige, almost like gray in color. They're not bright orange, for one thing. They're also much, much, much smaller. They're like an inch or two roots, whereas like, domesticated carrots are like 4 to like 12 inches. I mean, there's some carrots that are like as big as your head. So yeah, when things get cultivated, they tend to be bred to be bigger because why? Then growing one plant yields you more food, which is obviously in our interest. It's less labor, more food. You plant one seed and you get, like 500 grams of food versus like 50. Also more sugar. It makes it somewhat tastier. Also, more calories. Of course, there's other things in food. There's like plant chemicals that have a variety of effects on your blood pressure and on your organ functioning and all kinds of stuff. So some of those may get bred out. Like if again, have try a wild carrot sometime, then compared to like a cultivated carrot. Completely different experience. The wild things tend to be more bitter, more aromatic and concentrated in their flavor, smaller, and yeah, just kind of like smaller and more pungent. When people breed things, they breed them to be more pleasant, so like bigger and sweeter and all that kind of stuff. But it does lose a lot of those like wild qualities a lot of the time. People don't eat enough bitter food, for one thing, which has health effects. But yeah, people just kind of like eat sweet and oily stuff all the time. This is kind of a thing in fast food and like, I mean, there's huge industry, food science. Like they, come up with additives and chemicals and processes and treatments, and some of which are helpful in terms of like liberating more nutrients from food or like, preserving food, like, frozen vegetables, for example. That's hugely convenient. That just wasn't possible before home freezers existed. You lose a little bit of the nutrients in the freezing and thawing process, but overall it's worth it because those are vegetables you probably wouldn't have had even in a slightly reduced, like 20% reduced vitamins category, or state. So there's definitely benefits, but they're also doing things to food that some of which are not so good, and it may not be like toxic in terms of like you eat it and get like liver damage, but it can also be stuff that just over time is not as good for you as eating maybe like a less cultivated form of it or whatever. But yeah, this is definitely a thing. So in, like I was saying, fast food and in the food science world, they know that the human brain is wired for salty, sweet, and oily things. Why is that? Well, we're especially like evolutionarily we respond to those things because they can be somewhat scarce in the environment, but we need them. We need salt for electrolytes and fat. Well, there's certain fats that you absolutely need. They're essential. Your body can't synthesize them. So your body's wired towards fats. They're also very sustaining. And when a lot of your diet, let's say, you are a hunter-gatherer 20,000 years ago, when a lot of your diet's like tubers and things like that, if you stumble across something fatty, man, your brain is going to love that because it's, sustenance. And also sweet things. Sugar is quick energy. It's pleasant. I would say a lot of sweet things are also, good for you. Like various fruits and things will also have vitamins and other micronutrients in them. So what do they do with fast food? They just make empty calories that are sugar, salt, and fat. So this is where, yes, you can make things tastier, which is pleasant because, trying to just rough your way through really bland stuff can kind of suck. Like, or like super fibrous stuff 24/7. Yeah, you can just get tired of chewing after a while. But on the flip side, just eating cake all day, not as good for you either. And so I think that there does need to be kind of a balance of people enjoying those foods, but also getting somewhat back towards a more traditional diet. Again, the kind of like obesity and overweight is out of control. Especially the older you get. If you're in your 20s, your metabolism is going to be working a little bit better on average. As you get over 30, over 40, and so on, your body definitely slows down. It's like it's harder and harder to kind of keep in shape. So, yeah, I mean, on the one hand, we have a lot of choice in the food that is available to us in a country like the United States. On the other hand, you can definitely assemble like a really crappy diet out of it. So, anyway, continuing. Let's see. Oh, so somebody mentions, yeah, bread is gross now. I mean, you can still find some bread that's, more whole grain. Although, even a lot of the whole grain stuff, I mean, once you have ground grain into flour, it's going to hit you. Like, if you're eating a whole grain and chewing that and swallowing it, okay, that is actually a whole grain and your body has to break it down more and all the carbs aren't going to hit you at once. But, if you're eating like whole wheat bread, first of all, it may only be 50% whole wheat flour and then 50% white flour anyway. But even then, it's like when, you can take a whole grain, grind it down to powder as flour. Well, the glycemic index is, still, that's how hard it hits your blood sugar and stuff. It's still up there because there's just tons of surface area, so it hits your system really quickly. But this commenter brings up, since I got diagnosed with celiac, I haven't craved sugar. It's kind of awesome. So celiac disease is basically a wheat intolerance. And so are you saying you're eating like fewer calories now that you've gotten off the bread and stuff like that? Like there is wheat-free or gluten-free bread. But yeah, I've seen a lot of people having issues with wheat that just were not having issues with wheat and gluten like 10 or 20 years ago. And different people have tried to figure out what is going on with that. Some people think it might be changes in the microbiome. Some people think it's changes in how the wheat is processed. Like, nobody really knows. I have not heard a good explanation of that, but it seems to be more prevalent. I don't know what. But I'm glad that you're not craving sugar because food cravings, I mean, obviously we we all get hungry. That's normal, that's healthy. But food cravings are something distinct from like hunger. It's more pathological, and yeah, food cravings suck. Food addiction sucks. So, all right, moving on. Well, there's one more comment from so to get the same amount of nutrients, you need to eat more. This is talking about the wild vegetables versus the cultivated. Thereby, you eat more sugar. That's what I read about it anyway. Yeah, there's other things here too about like what's going on with the soil and are the same amount of minerals in the soil, and mineral depletion of the soil and things like that. There's a lot that needs to be done in this field. Like the kind of I'll say this too. From the scientific socialist perspective, a lot of times the focus is put on sheer quantity over quality in terms of production, and changes are more towards just quantitative abundance in certain areas that involve ecology, like the food system. You have to look at more than just sheer quantity. So like the kind of agribusiness monocropping stuff that they do, yeah, you're like mining the soil basically. It's very productive. It's very efficient in that sense. Therefore, you're producing a lot of tonnage of whatever crop you're growing. Okay, and that's great because it's some food and it has some nutritional value. But we also need to shift these systems while keeping quantity up. We need to shift these systems to things that are more ecologically, I hate to use the word because it's become such a buzzword, it's been drained of meaning almost, but sustainable, in the sense that you're not just merely mining the soil like one day it's just going to run out of stuff in it. We absolutely need to do things like that to keep the quality there, and also to avoid ecological disruption from these farming practices that are just creating situations in the fields that just are way, way, way out of whack with any kind of a wild natural situation. So yeah. All right, continuing. The state of the modern U.S. left makes me think that they saw what happened to the Black Panthers and learned the exact wrong lessons. That's possible. I'd be curious to hear more of your thoughts about that. Somebody says, what's socialism? Okay. Welcome. And what is socialism? Socialism is the struggle of the working class to basically first fight back against the capitalist class, which currently owns industry and has set up a government to further their private ownership and for-profit operation of industry. And when I say industry, I don't just mean like factories with big machines. I mean all the workplaces, from restaurants and everything that gets produced, goods and services in society. So right now, we live in capitalism, where capitalists, rich people, privately own industry, all the workplaces where goods and services are made. And capitalism, as it runs in society over time, pulls more and more people into a dispossessed, propertyless working class called the proletariat. That's what we call it. So the proletariat grows over time. The capitalist class shrinks. It's fewer and fewer numbers of wealthier and wealthier people. And socialism is the theorized next stage after capitalism, when the working class takes over industry and collectively operates it instead of letting the capitalists keep doing it. Once upon a time, a few hundred years ago, capitalists overthrew feudalism, which was the previous system. And capitalism at that time was progressive and it moved society forward. But for quite a while now, capitalism has become a stagnant and harmful force in society, and it's way past its sell-by date, and capitalists need to go, and the working class has all the skills that we need to take over industry and run it not for profit, but on we can produce the things that we need, and we don't have to worry about making rich people richer. And consequently, we don't have to fight wars between rich people over turf and stuff like that. So there are a lot of benefits. That is socialism. Hopefully that was a sincere question, but I haven't done one of those in a while. All right. Another comment here, a very quick comment about Hungary again. Liberals are very pro-EU here and identify with EU first and only with their country second. But the EU doesn't actually mind the far-right government. They carry out their jobs by giving West Europe cheap Hungarian labor and brain drain. Yeah. So this is a problem with liberals not understanding imperialism, not understanding the IMF and the kind of financial institutions that are interwoven with political groupings like the EU. I would definitely, center a lot of the efforts on trying to do that kind of education, showing those links. That would be my response. Let's see. On Skydog's point, this was the one about the Black Panthers. What do you think U.S. leftists can learn from the experience of the Black Panthers? Okay, so there is a follow-up comment. Mostly that the Panthers faced huge resistance from the state, and I think the modern left has become more and more opportunist in an effort to avoid that kind of backlash. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the, if you don't try, you don't fail, but you also can't succeed either. So, I don't know. I don't know that it specifically has to do with the Black Panthers, though, honestly. I think it's more of a general, just like people feeling wiped out, disgraced, and defeated. That's what I would say for now. So, next comment. Walter Rodney, in a speech that I uploaded, equated teachers, doctors, preachers, even movement members, unless they do class conflict, to police, meaning that these people are similar to police. I know he was trying to motivate, but that's a big reframe for many. Yeah, and I mean, we should understand the fundamental purpose of a teacher is like teaching things, and a doctor, deals with medicine, and a preacher, whatever they do. Whereas a cop is there for specifically one reason, is using force to, it's law enforcement. So it is different. But yes, it's true that teachers and some other publicly, some other professions that have licensure through the state and things like that are also given some quasi-state, like quasi-law enforcement almost functions, although it's not exactly the same as police. So mandated reporters is one example of this. People in education, healthcare, and some other fields, if they see certain things, they're required to report them to a state agency. So they're not exactly law enforcement themselves, but they are required and can lose their license if they don't, at least, they're like a semi-deputy if they don't engage in some way. I would say that is a difference, and it's kind of up to the individual, how they sort of go about expressing that, with what sort of enthusiasm. Are they going out thinking that they're, being a teacher or a doctor, but thinking that they're a cop? Or are they a teacher or a doctor trying to do their best in a system that they disagree with, while not trying to, like, fuck over the people that they're serving? So, yes, it's true that in some of those professions, there are things built in. And, I mentioned a formal example, mandated reporters. But there are also less formal examples, too. Yes, I mean, to some extent, teachers will teach the ruling class ideology, or doctors being petty bourgeois or bourgeois themselves. They're not big bourgeoisie, but being rich assholes in many cases, will bring their racism and their classism and sexism and all that into their practice and into their interactions with their patients. Yes, absolutely. I don't know that it's inherent to the thing all the time necessarily. So, but yeah, I don't know where else you were going with that, but yes, partial, somewhat agree. So let's see. Somebody comments, people should stop being afraid to be cringe. Organizing can feel cringe. Talking to people can feel cringe. Being based isn't all it's cracked up to be. So I'd say, somebody was just commenting on one of the videos, people don't know how to talk to each other anymore. How are we even going to build a party? So people have fewer friends today than they had 20 or 30 years ago. People seem to be losing their social skills or just not learning them in the first place. Let me tell you something. Plenty of before cringe, people would just say sort of they feel awkward or they feel self-conscious or something like that. This is just part of human interaction. You gotta just get over it. Social anxiety. I say you gotta just get over it. First of all, I'm not trying to like minimize people who've experienced trauma, things like that. So there are certainly exceptional things. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, everybody to some extent has fears about being socially rejected or this or that. When I say you just have to get over it, what I mean is for, the mild to moderate types of normal range of social anxiety that don't come out of like massive trauma or something like that. Okay. One of the best ways to deal with it is just practicing, and doing things you're comfortable with, but also pushing your comfort zone a little bit. Everybody feels that. I mean, that's sort of like issue one. Everybody feels some amount of social anxiety. Not everybody just is a pure extrovert going around talking to strangers all day long. One of the best ways of getting over that, and you're probably never going to completely get over it, but you can gain enough confidence through practice because most of the interactions aren't going to go that badly. They're not going to go as badly as you fear or that you're playing up in your mind. And, a lot of times people are a lot harder on themselves than other people are on them. Again, there's cases of abuse and trauma and things like that where people really build up big complexes because they have really been singled out by some kind of bully or abuser or whatever. And, I mean, even that, through therapy and practice, you can still lead more of a normal life eventually. You can. But I mean, for like average people who haven't experienced like that sort of, upper 10% of sort of like targeted abuse and things like that, everybody has that. But most of the time, you got to remind yourself, like, you're probably being harder on yourself than the other person is being on you. That said, I mean, read social signals. If you think somebody really doesn't want to talk to you, then, you can test it with a simple question, maybe one that doesn't, weird them out too much or whatever. But my point is, I think that a lot of people who get really anxious, it's partly an issue of not being able to get out of their own head and their own fears specifically. Through practice, you can definitely do it. And yet, this is important for organizing. You got to have a certain amount of confidence to be able to approach other people about, organizing in a workplace or whatever it is. These are good skills to have. You should practice them whenever you can. Like, don't get into a long conversation with your grocery cashier, but practice having a 2 or 3 line interaction or something like, you know what I'm saying? Like, just being politely, casually conversant with people can be a good start to just gaining a little bit of confidence that, like, not every person out there is going to bite your head off. So I think that's like a lot of people get very afraid and very sensitive to like the slightest possible sign that they could possibly interpret as rejection. And it's just not the case. I mean, people are social. People, it depends on context, but I mean, people like attention to a certain extent. Not every kind of attention, obviously, but if you have a casual, non-threatening approach of somebody over something specific that they have the chance to politely and comfortably decline or accept to keep talking about, so it's partly making people feel comfortable with you. I don't know. This is just sort of like basic things. So as far as organizing, feeling cringe and whatever, yeah, this is why if you go to organizing workshops, as many organizations do, whether they're Marxist or not, a lot of the trainings are just role playing of like one-on-one. Let's break into groups and just practice talking to it. Like, imagine this person's a stranger and talk to them. So, yeah, that's the thing is like, I think people get way too worked up about, coming off as like odd to other people. Most of the time you're really not. So, all right. Hopefully that's helpful. Next comment. Surprisingly, I've had a lot of luck recently talking to my Talking to some of my now older family members when it comes to Marxism. As of currently, they may still not be for it, but I've chipped away enough to the point that they're no longer against it, at least. Well, that's good. Maybe I start a channel and post a video or two talking about your experiences. I mean, people are always looking for ways to broach these topics with people, especially family members. And somebody else adds, same here, it's a little surprising sometimes. And there's a response, I know, right? Especially when your family is generally pretty conservative, like mine is, who hopefully soon to be was conservative. So, yeah, it definitely can, it can happen. I mean, obviously, in the earlier thing, don't go around bugging people, obviously. But, as far as casual, non-threatening interactions, a lot of people don't mind having somebody say hello to them or something like that. In most places, it's actually considered friendly. All right. Next comment. In response, this is the person who's talking about the union organizing. Our contract committee is made up of people who don't believe we can get more. Okay, there's a problem. I would definitely push back on that. Ask them, dialogue with them. Why don't they believe that, etc.? Excuse me, taking a sip. Or are buddy-buddy with management. Okay, well, that's a huge problem. You need to get those people out of any kind of a leadership position because you're never going to have an effective union that way. Never. You're never going to have an effective union when people think that management is their friends. Okay? Because that means that they're prioritizing their relationship with management over the union, basically. Those are, again, this is class conflict on a micro scale. They're diametrically opposed. Managers are there. They're agents of the boss. And prioritizing your relationship with management over your coworkers means your union has lost before it even got off the ground. Continuing, that one is a shop steward. That one who's buddy-buddy with management is a shop steward, and he's unreliable. Well, congratulations, you have a company union, basically. He makes excuses for the bosses. It's almost as if the elections are rigged, or more like selections, and you're in U.S., the Chicago area. And then when I say they don't believe we can get more, they say it's not like the old days. I think they're dead wrong. So, yeah, it sounds to me more like they are buddy-buddy with the... So you say the elections are rigged. I think you need to, it depends how much you feel like you can struggle there, but your union's not going to get anywhere with that person as the shop steward because they're clearly friends with management, and that's who they're going to go for in the end. When they say shit like, oh, we can't get any more, it's not like the old days. Fuck you. What do you mean it's not like the old days? That's just nonsense. There's nothing behind that. So I think what you would need to do is mount a strong campaign against that person getting reelected as shop steward. Get them out of that position and get somebody that's more militant in there so you can actually mount some struggle. I think that's probably a lot of the problem. I'm happy to continue that conversation, by the way. But yeah, if they're prioritizing their relationship with management over the coworkers, that's why you're not getting anywhere. All right, next one. I've been surprised how openly I can talk about communism with younger people. The Red Scare seems to be wearing out now. Yeah, they're kind of trying to revive it with China, but I don't think it's really got much traction outside of like the right wing of the Republican Party. So, what else do we have here? Going through the chat. A little more about food. I'm going to just... somebody says... This is interesting. I'm just going to read this out. I have no idea how accurate this is, but somebody said on the whole... I was talking about wheat before. The gluten intolerance is due to fast-acting yeast. Open-air soaked grains would encourage bacteria, which pre-digests the bread. Humans have eaten bread forever, but never before with fast-acting yeast. That's interesting. But doesn't it also... Well, okay. I still have questions about that, but makes me kind of want to get my sourdough going again. All right. Let's see. Somebody says, kind of reminds me of how Kraft American cheese isn't legally allowed to call itself cheese. There's not enough actual cheese in it. Yeah. Somebody else, well, this was in response to an Irish court ruled that Subway's bread isn't bread because it has too much sugar. It is a confectionery. So, yeah. Yeah. And also, humans are, I don't know what that word is, wired to eat as much and fast as possible before a larger creature comes to eat you. So, want to stuff food in our mouth and eat quickly, which is really not good. You should take your time, chew a lot. Per mouthful, eat more slowly. Loneliness compounds on this. I notice if I eat dinner with people, I do not eat as much. Yeah, it's that kind of like survival instinct. And then you get into like, food sort of substituting for social relationships and stuff like that. People eating for reasons other than hunger, but like people eating out of loneliness and stuff. Yeah, eating, it's a very social thing. And yes, it is better to eat in groups for sure. And also when you do eat with other people, try not having a screen on or stuff like that. Like, try just eating with them. It can be like a pretty quality interaction, actually. Yeah, this is like when we talk about, I mentioned in the last video that it was like, it's all talking about homelessness and topics related to homelessness. It was like a homeless advocacy group was talking about how people experiencing homelessness and coming out of it getting social services tend to do better in stable housing with community resources that are reliably there from day to day. And it's like, congrats. I mean, and again, this is not like a dig at homeless, pro-worker social services like housing activists at all. But it's like we're literally at the point, if you break this down, where we're reinventing like the benefits of living in society, something that we're just, everyone wants that. There's maybe a very, very, very few amount of people who are like naturally quote unquote loners, and then maybe some more people who have been really hurt and are mistrustful of people. By and large, humans are naturally social, and so it's like, what are we saying here? That people having housing and other bare basics on a day-to-day basis, and then being surrounded by community resources that they can count on. It's like, okay, you're saying people do better in a society than not. Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. But like, we have been individualized to such an extent, and any kind of communal spirit has been worn down to such an extent that, and I do think this is far worse in the United States even than in, say, Europe. The United States, like, the atomization of the individual is just next level. I don't know that there's anything else quite like it. But people are like so flat out afraid of each other. It's amazing. And just even, when you watch a group of people interacting, not everybody has to be the life of the party either. Even like introverts can be at a big dinner table or something, and they don't have to be talking the whole time. They might only say two things the entire time. But just being there, being around people in a social setting who are, just talking and laughing and whatever, it's good for you. It leaves you in a different kind of place. I feel like part of the issue people have with organizing, we're talking about all this, talking to people and just being comfortable in basic social situations. This is how debased it all has become. And we really do need to somehow regain some kind of a communal spirit. I think there's a reason why potlucks have been popular in sort of left-wing culture. I haven't been to a potluck in too long. They're fun. Just, being around people and doing things like that. I'm not going to say it's revolutionary, but I mean, it builds up a spirit of just a bit more of a communal type of thinking. It's good to share that kind of space with people. It really is. All right. What else do we have here? What else do we have? Going through the chat. This may be a more niche question. Is drug testing a form of class oppression? Well, let's start there. There's more to the comment. Is it used as condition of employment of the working class? And do does the big bourgeoisie get drug tested to be capitalists? Okay, no, this is one-sided. Therefore, yes. Just even on that basis alone, it's class oppression. As in, drug abuse being more likely in those suffering economically, and that further restricts their opportunity. I think that, I haven't looked at the stats in a while. There's also rampant drug abuse among rich people. They're just able to cover up the legal consequences and afford rehab and shit like that. But there's plenty of rich families that have the, quote, fuck up member. Or, I mean, how many, rich people drink constantly? So, I mean, I think a lot of the extent of that actually gets masked by when you have money, you can deal with the fallout of like substance issues, substance abuse, like much better. So that's part of it. Was reading about how that doesn't even exist in Canada, drug testing for most jobs. Yeah, it's an insane level of invasion of privacy. They're literally taking your bodily fluids, and that's a level of policing that's just unheard of. I mean, this is one thing. If your workplace is unionized, I've seen less of that in unionized workplaces than non-unionized ones, because nobody fucking wants to be giving bodily fluids. It's totally degrading. So this is definitely a worker rights issue, absolutely. Continuing, recently I had my anxiety medication taken because I use cannabis, which got me interested in that in general. So, I would say definitely a form of class oppression, yes. Continuing, along that same topic, one thing that comes to mind right away about drug use is that the rich and poor use drugs at similar rates, yet the rich usually get rehab at worst if they're caught by a test, not to mention the history of drug use and mass incarceration. Yes, absolutely. So the war on drugs is a racist war on the poor, and it, came out during, it was one way of fighting back against the New Left. So, for example, was like, okay, we can't criminalize being black exactly, although, at least formally. But what if we just criminalize, habits of working class, particularly people of color, although not exclusively? Well, there you go. You just criminalize recreational activities, and then you have found a way to incarcerate your political opponents. There you go. And then if you can profit off of it directly by, for-profit prisons, all the better. And then, that develops a life of its own and starts to snowball from there. But yeah, it's that, a more well-off person who doesn't have to show up to work every day or, do customer service or something like that, has a bad hangover, it may not show quite as much. You know what I mean? Like, so there's a lot more personal liberty in that sense, for different classes. So yeah, definitely. Somebody also mentions, higher positions generally do not test at all. Wall Street goons snort coke together, while the people that produce the value can't even toke up. Yeah, exactly. So, continuing, on the subject of cringe, or we'll say social anxiety or awkwardness, self-consciousness, whatever, Andrew Huberman has a podcast called The Power of Play, and according to neuroscientists, play allows neuroplasticity to occur in children, as well as uniquely powerful for adults who want to learn new skills or whatever. I like this idea for revolutionary LARPers. I don't want to do left adventurism, but revolutionary LARPing, like actual LARP, like actually just playing, in this context seems unironically fun. People taking themselves too seriously, you can definitely get into a position where your fears seem larger than life and start to control you. Learning to laugh about things, within reason, of course, within whatever you can handle, anyway. Not laughing at things that are actually like kicking your ass and you need to do something about. But people getting a bit more flexible and not taking themselves too seriously. Yeah, this is certainly a way that people can start venturing outside of that comfort zone, because then every little bad thing that happens or every slight discomfort doesn't seem like the end of the world so much. So they add that the podcast is called Huberman Lab. I've never heard of that, so I can't comment on that specifically. But yeah, not LARPing in the sense of like left adventurist, being a socialist, spouting all kinds of like violent rhetoric and that kind of left adventurism, but actually playing. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be LARPing. I mean, LARPing has its own kind of things going on. There are ways of playing and there are ways of having fun as an adult that you get to embrace the kid in you, but in a more adult, like age appropriate context. But yeah, having more fun absolutely is important. I'm a big believer in that, for sure. Continuing, sorry for this. So first of all, somebody said I'm on a seafood diet. I see food and I eat it. Absolutely. That's a good one. Sorry for the stupid comment from me, but hearing the part about eating as a substitute for social relations makes me instantly think of Bill Daughter from King of the Hill. Okay. I've seen a little bit. I just never got into King of the Hill, so I don't know who that character is. But yeah, for sure. I mean, for sure. It's a substitute for social relationships for a lot of people. Or like people will get angry and not necessarily having the skills or the ability to resolve like whatever's causing the anger, will like eat to kind of tamp it down. People eat for all kinds of reasons that are not related to your body's nutritional requirements. And like some of that, we're just talking about having fun. I mean, enjoy your food. Like eat things eat things that are good. Like you can eat a healthy diet that is also like fun to eat and tastes good. This is where a lot of like herbs and spices come in. For example, I was talking about traditional diets. Many places around the world like use much more flavorful ingredients which are not high calorie. Herbs and spices are greens and seeds and things that happen to have a lot of flavor to them, but they're not high calorie. So that's how you take a rice or a potato or beans or whatever, and you actually make them like interesting, is adding spices and herbs to them, because then they have a good flavor without being like super high calorie. It's like when you just eat meat constantly. A lot of people, meat has a very concentrated taste, whether it's seafood or like red meat or whatever. It has a strong taste. And a lot of like Western food, it's not really like seasoned. They just kind of rely on the meat for the flavor. But then people wind up eating way too much meat. One way you can get around that, herbs and spices. You can eat, quote, blander foods, maybe, more like plant foods that are a little higher in fiber, a little bit blander on their own. But then you flavor them with things, and that's important. And then it's fun. You don't just have to eat like porridge, like plain oatmeal. That's not really the idea. So anyway, yeah. So next comment, I think some people use the internet more for socializing than reality. Yeah, I think that's how you wind up with like The Matrix, like the situation in that movie. People definitely need to like unplug themselves and get out in the real world a lot more. This kind of needs to become a trend. That said, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening online. There are material reasons for that shift. Excuse me, I think I've talked about this before. Like gentrification, for example, led to the closing of many social clubs, cafes, music clubs, places where people would, go do poetry or just hang out, or there would be shows and stuff like that. And you could go, not spend a lot of money, but get out, talk to people, get some culture, like stuff like that. And especially through the 90s, the gentrification happened where a lot of those places couldn't afford their rent anymore. And so they closed down. So then there was nowhere to go. But then people started opening up like virtual versions of some of the stuff. And so you get all these like chat rooms and, what was formerly the province, chat rooms and the internet, formerly the province of like painfully shy people who couldn't go out into the real world at all. Now it's like everybody's going online. And it's not just, sort of people more maladapted socially or more loners or whatever. Like, I'm not trying to put down people who were on the internet in like the 90s. Like I was on the internet in the 90s. But it's definitely different. Like more and more people do it because the club, air quotes, so to speak, is now a Discord server. Whereas that used to be something in real life. Now, there's like benefits to that because you can meet people from around the world and it can be like more niche and whatever. but it's also like a lot more unmoored from reality in a lot of ways. And you're not getting, I read somewhere that 80% of communication is nonverbal. So, like, yeah, there's the words that somebody's saying, but like 80% of it is context and posture and body language and, just everything else going on in the conversation. And you're losing that 80% by being online. Not to mention just the immersive experience of actually being in that kind of environment. And I'm sure people are going to start trying to compensate for that with like VR. And might I add, though, there will be one benefit of that, which is that the amount of videos on YouTube of people using VR devices and then running into a wall will go way up. And I must say, I find those incredibly amusing. I cannot understand why people do not have like why that keeps happening. Like people have not figured out yet that, oh, if I do VR in this small room with a coffee table 2 feet in front of me, that I will invariably trip and go sprawling and probably also break the coffee table, if not my leg. And that's not funny. But Jesus, it's incredible. But anyway, yeah, doing stuff out in the real world. Part of the problem is there's fewer and fewer places to go. So make use of the places that you do have, and I don't just mean private businesses, but parks. Do what you can. Yeah, it's honestly kind of sad. Like the world has changed in many ways for the worse. Yes, there's a lot of very exciting things happening online, and this conversation is happening online, but there's loss there as well. So, continuing, somebody says, I think they're getting the poor people addicted to drugs, just like how they used opium to control China when it was colonized by the bastards. So let's say, first of all, drugs are not a monolith. Not all drugs are addictive, for one thing. There are plenty of drugs that are not. Opiates, yes, highly addictive, hugely destructive to health. Amphetamines, yes, addictive, hugely destructive to health. There are other things that are not addictive. They may be like highly, incapacitating temporarily, intoxicating. I tend to not like that word because they're not even all toxic, properly speaking. But yeah, I think not all drugs, we want to avoid the Nancy Reagan approach. Drugs are not a monolith. They're not all the same. Yes, certainly opiates. Like if we had more of a situation of like, well, anyway, I think I made my point there. So, I think you have to be careful with that. Yes, heroin and other opiates, many of them prescription, huge problem. And yes, people who do fall into addiction with those things, as can happen very easily because they give these things out like candy for people who have back problems or have surgery or whatever it is. Many people get hooked after they have a surgery, and then they are given a prescription opiate, and then they need more. And they keep, I know somebody who's had a family member die of that recently, and they were just not, if not for that they'd still be alive, and their whole life wouldn't have been ruined, and it, did a lot of destruction to their family and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I would in many ways single out opiates and other highly addictive things like that, but that's not all drugs. All right. So back on the union thing, getting rid of the steward has basically been my plan. I'd say it's a good plan, but that's not to say you can do it, but trying to do it, I think, is important. But despite getting a large amount of the shops saying that they'd vote for me, I still lose. They also don't tell people when they count the votes. So yeah, you may just have a crooked company union there, at which point what you can do is try to get, well, first of all, that may not be legal. Have you looked into this? So that's one thing that's occurring to me. Is what they're doing even legal? I would check into that. So another thing you can do if things get bad enough is try for decertification of the union and certification with a different representing body. You can do that. That's something that happens sometimes when people's unions are just absolutely awful to that point that you can switch unions that you may be able to have more control over that. It sounds like it's a pretty shitty situation. Like, I don't know how big your company is. It sounds like, if they're buddy-buddy with management, like, is this a small company and whatever. So those are some things I would look into, is the possibility of decertifying and recertifying with somebody else. And also, is everything that they're doing legal? You can, ask the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, try different phone numbers on their website. You sometimes, can meet calling up the NLRB kind of like an old-timer that, is from, the actual days where unions kind of worked a little bit better. And you can ask them some of your questions. Tell them what's happening, and, they might be able to help you open up a complaint or something. So, anyway, I do see other good comments, but we've been going for about 2 hours, and I might take there's not that much more of the chat, but I kind of do have to wrap up. So maybe I'll take the remainder of the comments and try to address them in a video tomorrow. But I unfortunately have to end the stream. But I thought this was a pretty good stream as usual, and we'll probably do it again next Tuesday, same time, same place. And in the meantime, go watch the videos that have been posted. I think this was a pretty good crop of videos this week. Thanks again to everybody for being here and being part of it. Sorry to cut it off with such little notice, but that's the way it goes. And thanks to the patrons, as always, whose names are not on the screen, but whose support is important and has allowed me to do a lot more content. So yeah, until next Tuesday, unless I notify you otherwise, we'll see you then, and look for videos in the meantime.